We want to tonight talk about the rights of incarcerated mothers, the rights of incarcerated mothers to breastfeed their children. But we don't want to just focus on the rights of parents to breastfeed their children. We want to focus on the rights of incarcerated mothers to actually parent and to be mothers, right? In the 1980s, when the government waged a war on poverty and drugs, the war on the family and poor women of color was taking shape as well. Currently, women make up the fastest growing prison population in this nation, with Black women particularly have an increase of 828%, have increased by 828%. These women are perfect targets for the prison system. Their parenting skills, love, and their abilities to parent have long been in question through years of devaluation, stereotypes, and dedicated public education campaigns. This is why in 2014-13, when poor incarcerated women in California were routinely targeted for sterilization, little more than a yell went out across the nation. Opponents have long used that old adage, children should not be punished for their parents' mistakes, or policies that restrict visitation and termination of parents, the rights of parents who are incarcerated are in the best interest of the child. Yet little to no clamor is made when incarcerated mothers are denied health care, are shackled, sterilized, denied needed medication for pregnancy, and denied the right to breastfeed their child. In whose interest is it to remove a newborn child from the arms of their mother within 72 to 24 hours of birth? Tonight we want to give breath and life and love to women across the nation who are suffering untold indignities through the prison incarceration, through the prison campaign, or through this carceral state, who are not only targeted inside of their homes, inside of their neighborhoods, but also inside of the prisons that confine them. And I want to open up by introducing Ayanna Banks Harris with the Chicago Alliance to Free Marissa Alexander, who's going to talk to us about two very specific cases that involve the demonization and criminalization of particularly Black mothers.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to be here to share the stories of two mothers who are just a minuscule representation of the thousands of mothers whose stories go untold and voices go unheard. Before we can even open this discussion to start talking about breastfeeding rights for mothers who are incarcerated, we have to really begin to examine how and why our society continues to cage mothers at increasingly exponential rates, and why we become comfortable with so many children being ripped from the loving care of their mothers, many of whom are very nurturing, supporting, loving, and providing. Exactly 4 years ago, a pregnant woman and mother of two at the time fled the marital home she shared with her second husband, who abused her on multiple occasions. Being pregnant did not ward off his violent attacks. 6 weeks prior to her scheduled delivery date, she gave birth to a daughter who would remain in NICU for weeks following her birth. 9 days later, the now mother of three was once again attacked and threatened and has been in a battle for the right to live her life freely ever since. She is Marissa Alexander. In August 2010, just 9 days after giving birth, Marissa briefly left her daughter's side to return to the marital home to retrieve some necessary documents, knowing that her estranged husband would not be there. While there, he did happen to return along with two of his children from another relationship. When he entered the home, he found her phone on the kitchen counter, began going through it and invading her privacy. In a jealous rage, he confronted her while she was still in the restroom, attacked her, strangled her, threatened her, and held her against her will. When she was able to finally leave, she left to go into the garage where her car was parked, but neglected to gather her keys and her cell phone. She attempted to open the garage door, but there was mechanical failure. Now trapped in the garage with no phone, no keys, and no way to leave, she retrieved her gun from her car, for which she holds a permit, and re-entered the home with the gun down at her side with the sole intent of retrieving her items and leaving through another exit. When her estranged husband heard her re-enter the home, he then came into the kitchen, became further enraged by seeing this gun down at her side, lunged at her, and yelled, "I will kill you," expletive. It was at that moment that Marissa raised her hand, with the gun in her hand and fired one shot in an upwards direction that did not hit him, did not hit anybody else in the home, and became lodged in the ceiling in the next room. Marissa has gone from asserting her right to live by defending herself against her husband to now needing to assert her right to live by defending herself in a fight against a system that now seeks to imprison her for 60 years for defending her right to live. Marissa is just one of thousands of women who are incarcerated for warding off abusive partners, as violence against women and girls puts them at an increased rate for incarceration because their survival strategies are deemed criminal. But domestic violence is just one precipice by which mothers fall into the criminal justice system. Earlier this year, another mother of 3 was forced to make a decision that no parent should have to. Leave her children in the car so that she can attend an interview, which would, if she got the job, she would be able to propel herself out of homelessness and poverty, or be a no-show to this interview. She had already secured childcare for her children the night before. However, that morning when she arrived, nobody was there to answer the door. Literally with no other options, Shanisha Taylor made the decision to leave her kids in the car and attend this interview. However, she did everything she possibly could to help alleviate the risk associated with doing so. She left the windows cracked and she left the fan going. When she left the interview, an interview she says went very well and was even offered the job, she noticed that her car was now in the center of a crime scene. Her 2 of her 3 children had been removed from the car and taken to the hospital. However, they were immediately released because they were unharmed. Though only 2 of her children were left in the car and they were both unharmed, all 3 of Shanisha Taylor's children had been removed from her custody. She was arrested and charged with 2 felony counts of child abuse and now faces upwards of 7 years in prison. What is solved by imprisoning Shanisha for 7 years? What is solved by caging Marissa for 60 years? How are these families, how are these children made any better by their mothers being incarcerated? How are our societies and communities any safer because they are incarcerated? Why is their behavior when they had no other options deemed criminal? Though the manner in which Marissa and Shanisha were catapulted into the judicial system and separated from their children are vastly different, a similarity is glaring. Both of these mothers, who are women of color, have been incarcerated not for actually inflicting harm, not for having the intent to do harm, but because of this hypothetical threat of harm that could have happened if the stars had aligned on that day for something to actually have occurred. No harm was done to anybody in either of these situations, but collectively they could face 67 years in prison. It is past time that we demand to live in a society that is less concerned with being punitive for every action and reaction and become obsessed with ensuring solutions that no mother is cornered in perilous situations with no options. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we're going to hear from Keely, who is an advocate for the rights of incarcerated mothers here in Chicago.
Hi, everybody. I'm R87-914. Even though I'm no longer in prison, that number, just like my social security number and just like my name, will never change. I am a proud mom and a new one at that. There were no balloons or cards, no flowers or family allowed in the delivery room at the time of my daughter Aniela's birth. It would be an inconvenience for the prison if mothers-to-be went into labor naturally. Each birth is scheduled ahead of time. Mothers are not told until the morning of that they are going to be taken to the hospital and induced. Family of the women are not told until a 3-minute phone call is made after the baby is born per discretion of the officer. During my 36 hours of labor, an officer would sit on the couch and watch me. She would make occasional small talk and sometimes even pretend like she cared. Their shift, just like any other person's, would end, and eager to go home, they would leave while as a new officer walked in. Pregnant women in Illinois and a few other states, most recently including Massachusetts, are not allowed to be shackled, only handcuffed. I can't imagine having to walk in shackles 8 or 9 months pregnant anyways. But so many of the guards in Illinois complain about not being able to use the shackles on us during our pregnancy. After birth, it's different, and women can once again be shackled, regardless of any pain from their stitches one may have had, or even the women with C-sections. Once they are born, all restraints are once again an option, and again, per discretion of the officer. So there I was, still in tears, both from being happy and also in pain, with my firstborn in my arms, an officer still on the couch, and my feet shackled to the hospital bed. All the time knowing that in less than 48 hours she would be taken from my arms, and I would be driven back to the prison, handcuffed and shackled the entire ride. Before the hard work of my sister and others last year, the Illinois Department of Corrections and state representatives agreed that breastfeeding by inmates was out of the question. After a long struggle for approval, they finally got the Department of Corrections to allow the breast pumps. Until I started last year using a breast pump in an Illinois prison without the baby. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm nervous, you guys. Okay. Until I started last year, until I started using a breast pump in Illinois prison. Until I started it last year, it had never been done before. It had never been done before. Still, there was no funding for the breast pump. Further efforts led to the donation of 3 breast pumps, along with other supplies needed to save and freeze the milk. So when I get back to the prison, there were two of us who had given birth the day before. I chose to use the breast pump and send home milk. She decided against it when she found out that if we choose to do this, we would be restricted to only the healthcare unit of the prison until further notice. For the next month and a half, I stayed in the healthcare and pumped every 2 to 3 hours, but there were still problems. That is, of course, after we were done mixing up the pieces. After we were done mixing up the pieces and trying to divide them from the 3 pumps, we finally got one set up correctly. I labeled bags of breast milk with the time and date, and every 2 weeks my family would have to drive the long 4 hours to the prison and pick it up, which ended up not being, which for most women wouldn't even be possible. Milk would be wasted if it was not brought out to the visitor. Milk was sometimes wasted. Everyone needs to be escorted in and out of the facility, and nothing can be brought in to help preserve the milk. So some of the milk was spoiled. On top of this, for most women, their families wouldn't even have been able to pick it up. I was taken out of the healthcare unit after a month and a half. The breast pump stayed in the while the breast pump stayed there. I was allowed to go every 3 hours during the day, but I was not allowed to pump at night. So a month after that, I stopped being able to produce milk, not long before I went home to my baby. I felt that it was a lot of pumping for no reason, and in the end, I was not able to breastfeed when I came home. Another thing that I feel important to mention is that after I was taken out of the healthcare unit, one day they called me back in, and another woman was about to start using the breast pump. They called me to find out how to put the second breast pump together. It wasn't because I knew a lot about setting one up. It was because everyone there knew so little. There was no one at the prison who can really support people using the pump. So it's a good thing that breast pumps were allowed in the prison, but it could be better. If they even had one person in the prison who knew exactly what they were doing and knew what was going on, it would have made a difference. It wouldn't need to be someone's full-time job. More people just need to know what's going on. I would tell the male guards I need to use the breast pump and they would have no idea what I was talking about. Find somebody else, and was just shocked that it was even happening. Also, they need reliable pumps that aren't so old. Donated pumps with scattered pieces is just a lot to deal with. Mothers have, and more importantly than anything else, mothers need to have access to this pump at all times, otherwise it doesn't work. You stop being able to produce milk, and it's just, the whole idea of it goes out the window. And when you're with your baby, they say just being around your baby helps you lactate. It just helps, and you can't do that. You look at a picture, and I mean, it's important to have, so it is important for women to have access to the breast pump. And in the end, no breast pump can ever replace having a child with you. Here's something I wrote a couple months after my baby Aniela was born. It's a journal I keep for her. I write in it a lot to her. It took me over a month to start writing. It's so hard for me to think about all I've already put you through. Nurses give me updates when the counselors here let me call. They say you're almost 10 pounds, starting to feel better, and that you love your baths. I'm not the one that holds you when you cry, or the one that you look at when you open your eyes. It kills me to know that the reality is I'm not a part of your life. I brought you into a world full of great things that are surrounded with pain, which you already know too well, and I have no choice but to let you handle it all on your own and without a mother. I guess you're not alone. It doesn't make sense, or it doesn't matter. Nothing about this feels right. Although I know you won't remember this, I can't help but wonder if you feel the emptiness I carry day and night without you close or anywhere in sight. I know my handwriting is sometimes sloppy, but it's late, and I'm writing in the background of the dim prison hallway lights. I'm about to miss your first Halloween, just as I've missed these last 2 months. I wish none of this was true, but deep inside, maybe underneath a whole lot, I know I need to tell you nothing but the truth, which also includes that I love you. I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you.
Next, we're going to hear from Maya, who's editing Truth Out.
Hi. So sorry. So while Keely was incarcerated during her pregnancy, I wanted to be able to reassure her and tell her that everything was going to be okay. But I couldn't do that because I had no idea if everything was going to be okay. And we knew she'd be giving birth under excruciating circumstances. We knew her baby would be taken away after 48 hours. And we knew, that DCFS was probably going to be on her back right after the baby was born, thinking about taking away custody. And that was also a big issue. Oh, by the way, Keely's my sister, I guess. Anyway, there's that. That's why I was worried. Part of why I was worried. Anyway, so when we started talking about this issue of breastfeeding, I thought, okay, this is one small specific angle that maybe I could advocate around in kind of an immediate sense. And the original idea was to advocate for a policy change that would allow breastfeeding during visits and that would allow women like Keely to pump milk in the meantime so they might be able to breastfeed when they got out. And this had been done successfully in a few other places in the country, but in most places it was banned, including Illinois. And so ultimately the advocacy paid off. Logan Prison did end up changing the policy to allow breast pumps, and Gail Smith, who's out there somewhere, there she is, played a huge role in making that happen. And it's wonderful that this policy has changed. But also, as you heard Keely say, this policy change on pumping is just a start. People need to be informed about the issue, obviously. There need to be opportunities for actual breastfeeding, contact with children, and for mothers to have more direct contact with their children in general. Beyond that, I think we need to take breastfeeding as a flashpoint for talking about decreasing maternal incarceration overall. Because this isn't about creating elaborate breastfeeding programs within prisons. That can't be, you know, we were talking at one point when we were putting this panel together about like, okay, like the pumps and how do we coordinate this and stuff. And we had this like dystopian vision of, well, what if there were just like all these pumps in prison and the women's like prison labor was pumping milk and sending it to the outside. And it was like, oh, can't do that. So yeah, so it's not about creating a breastfeeding wing of the prison. We always have to have our eyes on reducing imprisonment. So there are lots of reasons to focus on this intersection between breastfeeding and incarceration. And one of the reasons is just there are a lot of incarcerated pregnant women. At this point, about 7% of women in prison, about 7% of women in prison enter the system pregnant, and that's actually a conservative estimate. Some people put the number at 10%. And like most aspects of the prison system, this issue disproportionately affects women of color. So more than 10,000 babies are born every year to incarcerated mothers. And most of those babies are taken from their mothers within a couple of days of being born. And most of them, therefore, are never given the opportunity to breastfeed. Studies have shown that breastfeeding and even pumping have helped incarcerated women develop closer bonds with their babies while they're apart. And of course, breastfeeding always comes with a huge number of health benefits for both mothers and children, and that's something Rebecca will be talking about. Now, it's always better if women can get out of prison and not have to worry about breastfeeding or pumping while incarcerated. But since it's not possible to immediately get all women out of prison, we need to acknowledge that breastfeeding and pumping are basic human rights, and the vast majority of prisoners are denied them. Most pregnant women are incarcerated for relatively short periods of time, on average. So even if they're just incarcerated for a week or a month after giving birth, they might get out and be unable to breastfeed. And this especially applies to women in county jails who are there for pretrial detention. Can't post bail, they might be in for a short period of time. They get out, they can't breastfeed. And of course, there are also mothers of young children, like Marissa Alexander, who are breastfeeding when they're arrested. And then they need to suddenly stop breastfeeding because they're incarcerated. So this issue of breastfeeding also intersects with some really pervasive issues around criminalization in general. When I was advocating for getting a breast pump and allowing breast pumps in prisons, I talked to the Illinois Department of Corrections and I said, why don't you allow breast pumps? Like, what's the rationale there? And the answer that I kept getting was, it's a security risk. And I said, what's the security risk? Like, what's the danger? And no one could tell me. They just kept reiterating this idea of risk, the word risk, just coming up again and again. And it reminded me of the rationale for shackling women in childbirth. Because in that context, incarcerated women are considered flight risks, as if they'll get up and run out of the room while they're giving birth, if they're not shackled to the bed, which is probably pretty unlikely. So, yeah, and then another place that this idea of risk comes in is just the idea of women prisoners as risky in relation to their children in general, especially Black women prisoners. So this concept of risk gets ingrained in the criminal legal system to the extent that it becomes a rationale for Child Protective Services getting involved and separating women from their children even after incarceration. So this whole structure is built on the idea that mothers caught up in the prison system are risks instead of human beings. And when that becomes the assumption, human rights like breastfeeding no longer matter. Neither do rights like decent health care or retaining custody of your kids when you get out. So that's what it comes down to, I think. We have to get out of that mindset of inhumanity. And if we're going to talk about security risks, instead of talking about the dangerous threats of breast pumps or the dangerous threats of women in labor running out of the room, we should be talking about real risks to security. And that includes the violence of incarceration itself.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. I see some familiar faces. Hello. My name is Rebecca Jackson Artis, and I'm a certified lactation specialist by choice and a breastfeeding peer counselor. And I primarily work with Black women. Again, that's by choice. I work with any mom that decides to call my number or email me or contact me through social media. But my passion and my focus is my Black community. And because we are under a huge lie, and one lie that's being told is that Black women don't breastfeed. And I'm here to make it clear to everybody that we do. We do in large numbers, and that the CDC report that came out, Beth, what year was that, 2009? It's pure and simple lies. And so if anybody knows me and knows me well, I do not hold my tongue for anybody. My husband prays over me and sends a bright light over me every time I leave the house because, and my mother always says, somebody's gonna knock your teeth out one day, Rebecca. And you know, because I speak what I consider my truth and the truth I hope, and I pray every day that I speak the truth for my people. With that said, when Holly came to me last year and brought this subject to me, I knew a lot about it because a young woman and I had found that while working in the Chicago Department of Public Health, primarily in the WIC system, and I have my own opinion about the WIC system. That's probably not the majority of people's opinion about the WIC system. The WIC system was started by my Black Panther system and has been taken over by the government and diluted. So what you think the WIC system is actually probably like 0.001% of what my Black Panther people started it on. Okay, so anyway, going back to that, she came to me and she told me about this incarceration. She said, I would really like to know your so-called, your opinion from a lactation specialist. And I want to say this, within the lactation professional community, there are people that are called IBCLCs, and they're called Internationally Board Certified Lactation Consultants. I could qualify to be one, but I refuse to take the test. So there's some people that take my word and they dilute what I say because I'm not an IBCLC, but I've chosen not to be one for a political reason. So with that said, I do have a strong clinical background. And when I think about incarcerated women and being denied the right to breastfeed, to me, that is part of the design that is being done. What's happened to Marissa, what's happened to the other sister, what is her name? Shanisha, the one in Arizona, correct? that is by design, people. It is by design that women are being separated from their children. Do not think this has anything to do with the lies that was told to this Sister Maya, correct? And don't believe that, oh, it's a risk. Because deep down, they know that it's not a risk. They know that it's about money. It's about, because when that baby is not with the mother, that baby is being fed formula. And that baby is being fed formula made by pharmaceutical companies, Mead Johnson, Abbott Laboratories, okay? And that is a multi-billion-dollar business, people, okay? So it's a, you know, as Reagan called it, the trickle-down effect. It's a trickle-down effect. And then that baby also has, because of that formula that's being poured down that baby's throat, that is causing other health conditions. And also that mother is not being able to feel the benefits of that connection to her child. I can go study after study after study all day what separation from a mother and a child does to both the mother and child, hormonally, respiratory, cardiovascular, give me some more. I mean, let's talk about spiritual. And when that happens, they said immediately, when that baby is separated from birth, immediately cortisol levels rise. Babies start to go into a stress level. It's a level of stress. That mother starts to be stressed. Now, one thing that we as humans, we love to claim that we are superior beings, right? We love to claim that we are better than any animal on earth, right? But my sons, and I have to say I homeschool, and my sons, we now are talking about animal kingdoms. We've been talking about a couple months from now. And my son, who is 6 years old, said, Mommy, and just to let you guys know, my husband is an Alpha. He's Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And the Alphas, one of their symbols is an ape, a gorilla. And so my son said, well, I want to study gorillas. So we put on a documentary about gorillas. And it's real interesting about gorillas that when a gorilla baby is born, that mother does not let go of her baby for 2 years. And if the male gorilla who is the head, the alpha male, if he comes near her baby, separates her from the baby, that mother then gets rid of the baby, and then the alpha male kills the baby. So we need to start talking about that. You know, I mean, that's not an accident. That's real. And here we as human beings who are highly intelligent are women, and this is what I find very interesting. A lot of these laws that we say that women need to be incarcerated for are bull crap. So let's just put that out there right there. So we incarcerate these women for bogus corporate benefit. And then we separate them from their babies, which causes a whole host of issues, health problems, and like I said, spiritual, emotional disconnection. And then we profit off of them. We make them a commodity. And then when we put them back together, say, figure it out. Now, because this is on television, I'm going to refrain from saying certain explicatives. But bottom line, we know what that really is. It's crap. And so I came here today to tell you not just the reason why we all should breastfeed, because we know everybody innately, you are supposed to breastfeed. And also I'd like to say there is no benefit to breastfeeding. It's what we're supposed to do. That's like saying there's a benefit to breathing. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I can, oh, thank you, I can breathe. Oh, I'm glad you're breathing on your own. So, ladies and gentlemen, I really envision that I'm able to provide a perspective on this panel that will not only get you to understand that we are destroying humanity, but you can't just sit here in the audience and walk out of this room and go eat your dinner and not do anything.
Well, hola, my name is Jacoba Cruz Rodriguez, and I'm here speaking as a doula and perinatal educator. English is not my first language, so if you don't understand something, I would appreciate if you ask. I know I don't understand English most of the time, so I can ask. So basically what I'm doing here also, and I'm glad to be in this panel, is I'm trying to see like the topic in a full spectrum, full spectrum picture. When I'm talking as a doula and as an educator, and I'm also a health educator at Chicago Women's Health Center. So when we think about the depth that we have for this population, incarcerated women, and we have to see the big picture. We also have a depth on sexual education. We also have a depth on on services, pregnant women, like breastfeeding services. And we talked about the whole picture on we're not talking about safer sex. We're not talking about what if you're pregnant, how to prevent to be pregnant. If you're pregnant, how are you going to breastfeed, or postpartum education, etc. So I think the depth is big, and that's what we wanted to to focus in as a full spectrum picture. So. For those of you, I don't know if there are doulas in this salon today. Are there any doulas? Good, great. So, I want to speak a little bit about what we doula do, especially connected to to women and incarcerated women. So, we women like doulas, we support pregnant women. We are emotional support. Right? And we're kind of a pain relief, like a buffer on harsh times to pregnant women. We are there for women if women choose that we're there for them, because we cannot force women to be there, if they don't want us there, right? But being a doula is one of the most ancestral practices in the world, and we've been there. We have been called doulas, we have been called friends, we have been called mothers. So it's important that we connect to that nature of our profession. We do offer comfort measures, and this is something very important because in terms of talking to with the work that we do with incarcerated women, it's not the same work that we do with women when we're they're giving birth in their houses, for example, and they have the right to move, they have the right to go to the bathroom whenever they need it. They're in pain, so we can shower them with hot water. We can hug them, right? So incarcerated women, they don't have that right. They cannot move as much as they would love to. They live they are in a small, I don't even remember the name, where is the name? The cells. Thank you. I'll be making a lot of questions regularly. So this is something that we have to connect, and that's what I want to reconnect. When we're talking about doulas and we're talking about pregnant women, especially in prisons, it's not the same, right? So we educate and we inform, and this is something very important because this empowers a lot of women, and we don't empower women. Women empower themselves, right? So we give them the education and we give them the information so they can feel very empowered. Incarcerated women, they most of the times feel and it's not only that they're in prisons, but they're all often said that they don't have the right to choose over their bodies. They don't have any right to choose over what to do. And empowerment is something that it might be very complicated for women when they're living in these situations, right? So this is something that also, if you add it to the information and the materials, right? Not only the resources, but also the accessibility. This is something that is there, it's here in the question, right? We do that, but who does that for incarcerated women, right? So we advocate for women, and that is why sometimes, most of the time, some caregivers, they don't like to work with us because we advocate with them and for them, right? And sometimes caregivers, they don't want to work with us because, of course, especially in this patriarchal society, they don't want doctors or male doctors. It could be either. They don't want nobody to tell them what to do and how to do things, right? So that is something that we do in our communities and the hospitals, and we should do for incarcerated women too, right? So, and before I keep on going, I would like to share some statistics because I don't specialize on incarcerated women. I haven't been in Chicago even for a long time, not even a year. But I guess like since I came to Chicago and because of my experience working in Puerto Rico with pregnant women and mostly with Latino women, I noticed there was something going on in Chicago. Many people talking to me about the incarcerated women in prisons and all this. I started reading about like the statistics and the tendencies and situations that women live in prison. And that really got my attention because I could not find, like I'm a Bergjuster worker, and I couldn't find lots of people in Chicago who were like doing stuff like, right, for doulas working in prison. So that started to grab my attention, like why is it? Like there's so many doulas like in Chicago, there's so many people like professional people, perinatal educators, and they're getting like certified. So why is this like emptiness around this community? So I started looking for studies, and as Rebecca said, there's so many studies, and we can mention them all. And I know some people need evidence, right? So, but sometimes I do because I like the scientific-based things. All sometimes convince people, and this is part of the advocacy work that we do. We want to give proof, right? So I was reading this perinatal needs of pregnant incarcerated women study from Barbara Hotelin, and some statistics grabbed my attention. I will read them. And it says, incarcerated women labor and birth experiences do not even begin to approach the condition described in La Masse international regulations, 6 care practices that support normal birth. And the lack of screening and appropriate medical treatment leaves these women and their babies at risk for the lifelong health problems. In 2003, the number of women in state or federal prisons increased 3.56%, while the number of male prisoners increased to 2.2. So I mean, that's also something that we have to. This is a gender issue. This is there's a difference here that we have to be aware of. Since 1995, the annual increase in female inmates averaged 5%, higher than the 3.3% increase in male inmates. More than 2/3 of imprisoned women have children under the age of 18 years old. Approximately 6% of these women are pregnant at the time of the arrest. With the growing number of incarcerated women who are pregnant, it is important to recognize that failing to provide preventive and curative health care for these women may cost more to society than funding programs that might improve attachment and parenting behaviors, facilitate drug rehabilitation, and reduce recidivism among this population, and on and on and on. And post-traumatic stress is elevated by strip and cavity searches. Now I got it. Handcuffs and shackles, which are not used in Chicago since 1990s, but we still have handcuffs. Confinement to small cells, isolation and control by predominantly male staff, and on and on. Many statistics about the conditions. On my search, I also found this book. It's called Women in Prison, Gender and Social Control by Barbara Satso and Jim Thomas. And I would like to give you an idea of some tendencies that we can see around the pregnant women giving birth in prison, right? So women in prison meet their labor provided later in terms of the time, like compared to women outside of prison. There is a big connection, like when women get into perinatal education, later, there's so many risks connected to the, health conditions like nutrition, and there's some information they need to get before time, and they're getting it late on their pregnancy. Also, the tendencies C-sections increase because of the circumstances of labor, like the stress, and then if they're stressed, then the dilatation is lower, and sometimes they don't even dilatate, so that can cause C-sections. So that's another tendency. There's a lack of counseling on postpartum stages, especially when we separate women from their babies. If it's a normal birth, it's only 24 hours and they're ready to separate the mother to the baby. If it's a C-section, they give them 48 hours. If women don't find any kind of support, they end up believing that because they are incarcerated, they shouldn't experience a positive birth experience which might benefit the baby's development and future life enormously. And there's studies about that. Same when they don't find emotional support when they're separated from their kids. There's so many things that could happen to a woman after giving birth, postpartum depression. If they don't have support, there's so many things that could happen to these women. And we have evidence based on keeping the newborns connected to their mothers. It reduces recidivism rates for the parents, and it's also so good for the heart, respiratory, like the connection spiritually. So it's there's also evidence for that. So there's also like a punitive shame of action, because there's no thinking also about the children. Something that I always think about when I talk about this topic between friends is, like, I always tell my friends, well, when we're talking about the topic is, if while we're talking you're still thinking about, like, we're thinking about incarcerated women and you're still thinking, but what is the reason they got incarcerated? You know, if you are thinking about that, then there's a problem. We're being part of the problem and we're not being part of the solution. Because if you are making a difference of, oh, incarcerated pregnant women versus pregnant women, and you're still seeing like it's two different things, then that is a problem. And that is the call that I think most of us we're doing here. It's like there have been like very successful programs around nations. We haven't found many in Chicago, but that doesn't mean that it's not time to do it. It means like there's so many programs. In Idaho, we found a program that they have like camps when the mothers can meet with the kids for a certain time. In Washington, I found several programs that they not only have doulas, but they train other people to do doulas, as well as we have like, it's a full spectrum, right? The doulas, we have abortion doulas, we have birth doulas, we have postpartum doulas. So some even women are interested in becoming doulas just because it is directed to incarcerated women. So I think that is the question that we want to put on the table. As I don't know if that's a translation with Spanish. We say like we put things on the table like so everybody can see, we can talk about it. It's like there's a whole picture here, and there's so many things and that we could do, and that's what I asked for doulas. It's like I think like we perinatal educators, we doulas, we like people interested in this topic. We have a depth with incarcerated women, and I think it's time now. Like this panel is a good start, it's a good starting point to start thinking like, what can we do? How can we organize? How can we like do like this kind of forum? How can we do rallies? How can we talk about options? Can we meet and can we maybe do something on breastfeeding and connect? And maybe we can find creative breastfeeding program in order to like donate the milk to other mothers. So they're so enormously, I'm pretty sure many people in this panel have a lot of ideas, and I'm pretty sure many of you do have too. So I think this is the closure of the panel to let that discussion flow, right? Yeah? Okay, so I'm done.
I think we're gonna open up the floor for questions, but before we do, I wanted to ask a few questions to the panel. So I want to start with you, Ayana. So the battle for women's rights is a long fought battle that's been fought on many different fronts for many different years. And so in the prison system, we see that the state goes very unchecked in its violation of women's rights and their right to choose on so many different fronts. And what do you see hinders people's ability from expressing more compassion for mothers who are incarcerated? Like, where's the fight for mothers who are incarcerated, and what do you think is hindering people from acting?
A couple of things, and I think Jacoba touched on it just a bit, is we other people by using those labels as incarcerated, criminal, guilty, felon, things of that nature. And in doing so, those words carry stereotypes that follow them. And we then other those people, and we begin to feel that they are not deserving of some basic human rights. And we need to abandon those thoughts. We then believe that maybe their children are better off by not being with them because they do carry these labels, incarcerated, so on and so forth. I think it's also important to remember that everyone who is incarcerated is not necessarily guilty of the crimes for which they've been found guilty. And so it's important to remember that too and have compassion for that as well. And that even if you are guilty of these crimes, which Rebecca touched on as well, is that over the course of the last few decades, activities and behaviors, especially of people who are impoverished or in very desperate situations, are now being deemed as criminal when 10 years ago, those actions might not have been deemed as criminal. So I think it's important to remember that at the end of the day, we are human, and we need to remember that these are just human beings who happen to be incarcerated, or human beings who have been incarcerated, and remove these titles that we choose to put on them.
Yeah. And so I think that's a great segue into asking Keely if she can talk about some of the experiences of women who are incarcerated as an advocate and as someone who's been in close conversation with folks who are incarcerated or mothers who happen to be incarcerated. What are some of the experiences and voices of those folks?
A lot of women, drugs, if they weren't arrested for drugs or possession of drugs, they were high at the time. And a lot talk about boyfriends. You know, I took time for my boyfriend because guys get more time. So as women, a lot of people, a lot that I've talked to, because we sit and we share stories, and a lot, you know, as a woman, I'll get less time, so you know, I took it, or I was with a boyfriend at the time. It wasn't my idea. Whether that's true or not, you know, we'll never know. But in small crimes, you know, repeated offender, the retail theft, and then the second time you get caught, whether it be for a pack of gum, you know, it's happened before, and automatically, you know, more time.
Yeah. So Maya.
I think Maya had a lot more to say about that also.
And so Maya, you talked some in your opening statement
about this being a larger movement and how we have to continue to envision and think about it as a broader issue. And so if you can talk briefly about how breastfeeding fits into a larger movement.
Yeah, definitely. So I think when we talk about incarcerated mothers, it needs to be clear that there's not just one thing happening. It's not just one clear-cut effect that then we can fix and then it's fine for them to be incarcerated. And breastfeeding is one of those aspects that's rarely talked about. But when you bring it into focus, it really sheds light on how these core aspects of motherhood are just being denied to women in prison. And my first reaction when I thought about getting involved with this issue was like, well, is that really the right thing to get involved with? Because shouldn't we be doing things that just shrink the system? Which in general is definitely what I would say. But so I guess the question was, well, does breastfeeding not fit in with the movement because it doesn't fit that goal? But it does fit that goal. I think it's actually part of the point because there are mothers whose lives are being destroyed every single day. And we need to support them in connecting with their babies. And that's actually a goal that I think is the opposite of prison, because prison is about disconnection, it's about breaking bonds, and it's about violently severing people from their families and communities. And this kind of work, the doula work that you were talking about, Jacoba, like the breastfeeding work, all of this is about bringing people together and finding ways to build that back. So I think those are some ways it fits in. And definitely the projects that are going on already, especially within the doula movement, I know the Massachusetts Prison Birth Project is really on the cutting edge with this, bringing doulas in, like looking for ways to not only support women when they're incarcerated, but also like hook them up with people who will stand by them and advocate them throughout their imprisonment and stick with them when they get out. These doulas are advocating for women upon their release. You know, they're providing support when women come out and they don't have anyone else. So that's something that I think it's bigger than this question of like, oh, we need to solve the breastfeeding problem. So, yeah.
Well, okay, so I guess, okay, let's do a hypothetical. A mother gives birth. A mother's not allowed to do skin to skin. And if anybody knows, how many people know what skin to skin is? Or they also call it kangaroo care. I feel like that just isolates one animal, but it's called skin to skin. And that's no shirt, no bra. The baby has no clothes except for a diaper. In some cultures, the baby doesn't even have a diaper. In a lot of indigenous cultures, they could tell by the way the baby moves if the baby wants to urinate or defecate. It's only here in America that we don't want to take the time to figure that out, and so we put a diaper on them. And then we have 2 years later have to potty train them. Anyway, so no, that you put your baby on skin to skin, and right then, right when the baby is born, you put that baby on skin to skin, and right then it helps to hormones start to regulate, respiratory rate starts to regulate, temperature starts to balance, just numerous things. I mean, I mean, it's perfection. That's when you hear that word love cocktail starts flowing. And then we have the placenta gets released. When that placenta gets released, then you have these two hormones that really is benefit, it's really what lactation is, which is prolactin and oxytocin. And prolactin gets pumping, and that prolactin is what creates the milk. Prolactin produce, if you want to think about it like that. And oxytocin is what helps to express the milk, right? So you get those one, and this is all going while the baby's on there. In the meantime, now there's a debate going on in the lactation and birth professional community. We have some people that say, no, you're supposed to help that baby and put that baby on. There's some people that call it the breast crawl, where they say babies on their own will start to work their way toward the breast, and you'll see it, and they start to bob their head and move it, and they know, and they can know where that areola is and that nipple is, and they latch themselves on. Whether you are pro helping the baby or you let the baby work its way onto your breast, either way, that baby knows. If you've had a completely natural birth, most of the time you have no problem with latching on. That baby latches on, you guys are rocking and rolling. And then with that burst of the expression of milk, which a lot of us like to call it colostrum, I like to call it milk, because then women get it confused. They think colostrum is not really milk. You'll hear the phrase, well, my milk didn't come in until a week later. That's crap. You always had milk. Milk was created in your body early, around 16 to 20 weeks gestation, and it's just waiting for your baby to be born. Isn't that amazing how your body works? And then so that baby goes on and gets that wonderful colostrum. And we know colostrum is like the king of all foods. Colostrum, if everybody got a drop of colostrum every day for the rest of their lives, there would be no cancer, there would be no obesity, there would be no depression, I mean, colostrum is amazing. I mean, if you study colostrum, you would go, I don't understand. Why don't we spread this around? And I'm sure there's some corporation that's trying to figure out how to duplicate it and patent it as we go. But it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And every baby is born with holes in their guts. Every baby. And if you think about putting a painting on the wall, and when you move, you have these holes in the wall, right? So you have to take what spackle, you cover the hole, then you take primer, and you prime over that, and then you take paint. Well, colostrum is like that spackle. And then that, what they call transitional milk, that in between, that's kind of like primer. And then that milk, what everybody calls the final milk, which it's just milk that we think, we are accustomed to seeing. That's what you call the paint. And it helps create that perfect digestion system for the rest of that baby's life. Every time they tell you to eat Greek yogurt, for us or those who are vegan, we know that, you can get probiotics. If you were breastfed, you have great immunity, you have great probiotics, you have everything. So, that's that honestly, if we were to take that is like 0.0000001% of the benefits of breastfeeding. There's so much more to breastfeeding, especially the first, 2-3 years of that child's life. Yeah, I said 2-3 years. Yeah. And then let's talk about to the mother, just the benefits to the mother. Her uterus starts to shrink. She gets that sexy belly back. She starts to hormones start to regulate, because prolactin and oxytocin are your feel-good hormones. It just makes you, there are times when you put your baby to your breast and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the best high in the world. And at night it helps you go to sleep. And during the day it gives you that burst of energy. So, and with that's why they're saying that you're less likely to get postpartum depression. Just for that. Cortisol levels drop in both. Cortisol is one of your stress hormones. And then we're talking about it lowers the longer you breastfeed, 6 months, year. And we know the first 4 weeks are crucial, because if you get that first 4 weeks right, it's like riding a bike. And I tell a lot of women, it's like starting a new job. The first month starting a new job, you're asking 50,000 questions. You don't really know what's going on, and you're trying to figure. But after 3 months on the job, you're walking in and you're doing things. You're like, oh, I didn't have to really do that, And you know the system. You know how the job works. So that's the same thing with lactation. And then the longer you breastfeed, the less likely you have a chance of getting breast cancer, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, and then your cardiovascular rates drop. All these things, and even your menopausal symptoms are lowered later on. So it's so much more than that. And then we also know the breastfeeding mothers are less likely to abuse their children and things like that. So it's, again, I can't tell you in this panel how crucial it is that we breastfeed our children. Not just for the sake of our children, but the sake for the mothers. And we all know the African proverb, you can educate a man and you've educated an individual, but if you educate a mother, you've educated a nation. And so if we can't support our mothers, our nation falls.
So, I'm sorry, Jacoba, if you can answer the question of, so where does this put us for programs and policies, and how do we move and advance on new policies and programs for breastfeeding moms?
Personally, I believe there's so much work to do, and and I know many people have their different styles. Not everybody is on like pushing policies. Not everybody. Some people are more radical. Some people are more into advocacy. So I think we need to read and learn a lot of what other peoples have been doing, and they have been it has been successful. Like Massachusetts group. I've been talking to them, and it's amazing when you talk to them, and they just told me, we just got worried about the topic. They started doing panels like this. They started talking about the topic, because you need also to figure out how people have been doing it. In Minnesota, they just passed a law that, even though it's baby steps, it opens to possibilities to incarcerated women to have access to perinatal education or the right to choose a doula. So, even though even having, for example, doing advisory committees to prisons, and requesting meetings, requesting writing letters, and requesting our wards, and I don't even know the names of the politicians here in Chicago, but requiring them the right to do projects. I know some organizations like Chicago Mental Health Center. We have had these conversations. We have Megan here, who's also been an advocate of the topic, and we have been trying to find out how do we do this? How do we get to these prisons and say, hey, we're here, we're an organization, and we have programs that we would like to share with this population. So I think the first step is what we're doing. It's talking about it. It's not, I don't know if that's the word in English, it's but making invisible the population. I think we have to make them visible, the population, and especially people that are saying that they're connected to like reproductive rights, sexual rights, and if we are talking about reproductive rights, let's talk about all the reproductive rights for every woman and for everybody. Let's just not ignore populations and like just say that we are advocates of reproductive rights. We have to visibilize every single person in the spectrum. So I think that's a start, and I think that that's something that we also call in this like forum. You know, like if you feel like the need, if you are interested, if you feel that you are motivated to do something, you don't have to be a doula. You don't have to be a professional, have a certificate. You know, this is ancestral. This is something that, you know, if you have the feeling and that you would like to do something, that's good enough. Get together with us. Let's do something. Let's talk about how can we get together, meet, and like create some initiatives to make it flow. So I think the will is the first thing to like, and then we talk about policy, and then we talk about pushing things and doing rallies. So yeah, I think that's what I have to say about it. So.
Are we open it up for questions?
So some of you, all of you, hopefully got these strangely colored cards when you came in. So if anybody has already written down a question, I'd be happy to grab it from you. We're hoping to do it that way to keep it sort of respectful and concise. So grab this down. Does anybody else have it? And keep writing, and I'll keep grabbing.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask a question, and anybody can feel free to snatch a mic from the other person. Duel it out if you choose. So the first question is the organization Breastfeeding USA involved in this cause?
I don't think so. I don't know. Actually, I talked to Nancy Moorbacher, one of the founders of Breastfeeding USA, a couple weeks ago. We had lunch together. I don't know. I mean, that would be a good organization to connect with. Oh, and by the way, Breastfeeding USA is like, I guess you could say it's like the new La Leche League. It's, yeah. So, does anybody know what La Leche League is? La Leche League, it's simple form. There are breastfeeding support groups throughout the world. And usually it's supposed to be one near you. You can just put in your zip code and you go there as a breastfeeding mom and get the support and the more community-based help.
If someone can share their thoughts on the intersection between prison and the medical industrial complex, I'm assuming. Both have bad histories of controlling bodies, especially Black women's bodies. And so if anybody can share their thoughts on the intersections between those two. Between the intersections between both prison and the medical industrial complex, and I think Rebecca, you talked about that briefly about how these are rippling effects, right? And so that the removal of children also feeds into these larger and longer term medical things, but also I think in what ways do both of those intersect and also help each other out?
Well, the answer is of course. I mean, of course they connect, right? I mean, you know, anytime you're separated, I mean, it's a biological need to be connected to your baby for health reasons. And when you're separated from your baby, I mean, it's literally a domino effect of health conditions that come from it, mental and physical. So yeah, and it is a target to Black mothers. It's a target to the Black community. I mean, the Black community is at war, and until we can really, you know, a lot of us don't even realize it. And we need to understand that yes, we are being targeted. black children are being taken away from black mothers systematically and by design. And until we start admitting that, and until white people start admitting that they have a role in it, then nothing is going to change. You understand that? Until we start talking about racism and white privilege, people, nothing is going to change.
I will add to that, just that, you know, as people are incarcerated, they are left vulnerable. They have no control over their bodies. And so pharmaceutical companies, medical facilities can come in and begin doing testing. You know, I believe it was the 60s or the 70s, they came in retin A, a very common treatment for acne that dermatologists prescribe. That testing was done on prisoners. So it's very, before it was then allowed to go out into the public for teenagers and adults alike to, you know, use freely. So we have to also look at, you know, what are then the benefits of incarcerating people, because we can have them, you know, be our test, or, you know, serve as testing. Instead of testing animals, we now need to look to see if products are actually saying, well, are you testing on prisoners? You know, and we also know other things that are being done with prisoners, i.e., you know, Whole Foods, you know, using prisoners for creating certain products. So, I mean, it just continues. So it's not even just the medical, it's foods and clothing companies, the like. So,
because it started in slavery times, when we were enslaved. I don't like to say that black people were slaves. We were enslaved. We were never slaves, and we did not come from slaves. Nor are we minorities. We are people of color. We are black. Minorities mean losers. You are at the end of you're at the bottom of the totem pole. So every time you call me a minority, you call me a loser to my face, and you will get a lecture. Anyway, but I have to say that really, you know, whenever I hear that word. But yeah, it started in slavery. Black women were treated as guinea pigs. You know, when you get a pap smear, we were the ones that we were the test bunnies for you white women to know what was comfortable or not for a pap smear, because they would stick anything and everything up us. We were the test bunnies. Anybody has ever heard of Henrietta Lacks? If you have not read that book, you are not living, and you don't know, and you are benefiting from, every time you go into your doctor's office, you are benefiting women from Henrietta Lacks, because her DNA is now being spread all over the world and is the reason why they are testing. And we can go on and on about the power of melanin and why they are targeting us, black people, and studying us. So yes, and then now, since they can no longer in their terms, because, you know, the Emancipation Proclamation was not an elimination of slavery. It says in there that you are no longer enslaved until you are imprisoned, until you are charged with a crime, then you are now a slave. If you read the Emancipation Proclamation, people. So once we are enslaved again, then they can do whatever and whenever on us. Yes, and I can tell you, and I'm gonna say that, and I'm gonna end, but this is the thing. When I was when I was one of the co-founders of the peer counselor program at UIC, I saw so many times that my black teenage mothers were being targeted for sterilization on a regular basis, and they weren't even told they were being sterilized. And it happened right in front of me one time, and I whispered to the sister, and I said, "Do you know what she's putting in your IV?" And she said, no. I said, well, ask her, ask the nurse what she's putting in your IV. And she said, oh, I'm putting Depo-Provera in your IV. And the woman was breastfeeding at the time. She was, I think, 1 or 2 days postpartum. If anybody knows, Depo-Provera will dry up your milk within 2 or 3 days, and you will not be able to breastfeed. And I asked the young sister, I said, did she tell you what she was putting in there before she started to put it in there? And she said, no. But black women are being targeted even in third trimester. We're being approached with, what is your contraception going to be? And even at UIC, I had an OBGYN said that we got to sterilize women. And I said, why? He said, because I don't want to see them back in 9 months. And I said, if anything, that's a benefit to you. You get to bill. So we need to understand, yes, black women are being targeted. Yes, black women are being abused. Yes, in and out of the prisons, we are attacked.
Well, thank you, guys. I also just want to...
safety like factors that are, I mean, go hand in hand. With the cavity, the strip search, and the cough and squat, you're 8 months pregnant and you're being told to, you know, squat. Like, I've seen women not fall, but close to it. Like, you lose your balance and they don't care, and you didn't. I mean, it's kind of sometimes gross to talk about, but like, you didn't squat far enough. You know, you're 8 months pregnant and you didn't go low enough. Do it again. I mean, it sucks. So it really does. And I think I'm yeah. I mean, if you're pregnant, you're 8 months pregnant. I can't, like, because you see other women too, and it's just like they treat you. They're just so inconsiderate, not caring whatsoever about the fact that you're carrying a child. And I mean, when you said not owning your body in prison.
Yeah. And I think just another linkage between the medical industrial complex and prisons is just the history, particularly for Black women, of diagnoses and bipolar and schizophrenia, and how they've been used to misdiagnose, mistreat the behavior, and control, not only mistreat, but also control the behavior of Black women particularly, but women, of poor women, and how one of the largest populations of incarcerated people are people with mental disabilities, and how it's a warehouse or a storage facility for this country's lack of attention to much needed health care programs. And it's the way that it basically treats poor folks with mental disabilities, and that and in a lot of the cases, they're actually the ones creating the disabilities. And so misdiagnosing an 11 or 12-year-old girl, particularly a Black girl who's angry or stressed out about a million other things, and then misdiagnosing her with bipolar disease because she can't control her anger in a classroom, or diagnosing them with ADHD, because in all of these labels carry with us medication, and they also carry with us further implications on like what our outcomes will be. And so I just didn't want to pass up that opportunity to say that. Bam. What can we do in Chicago to end the incarceration of mothers and all people? What campaigns and organizations can we support, and how?
Well, I'll always make a plug for the Chicago Alliance to Free Marissa Alexander. So though she's not here in Chicago, she is in Jacksonville, Florida, being prosecuted by Angela Corey. We continue to raise money for her retrial, which is slated to begin in December of this year. It has been postponed several times. It was actually supposed to begin in July of this year. We are also awaiting word if she will be allowed a new stand your ground hearing, and that decision is expected to come in August of this year. So you are more than welcome to join us. We actually are doing, having an entire month of standing our ground to support the efforts going on in Jacksonville. And so we do have the activities that we'll have throughout the month listed over there. But I think one of the reasons we wanted to come together is that we can form something specifically for women here, not only in Chicago and Illinois, that this isn't just a discussion, but that this is the beginning of us coming together to begin organizing. And we will talk a little bit more about what our next event will be. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the reasons that we wanted to do this is because, like, as people have been saying here, there is a lot of great work going on, and zeroing in on mothers is something that really needs to happen more in Illinois. And I will give a plug for Project Mia, which is going strong, and Miriam Cabo, who's over there, is running it, and that's focusing on incarcerated girls, but also much broader than that, and CLAIM, which Gail, I think, helped start, and Visible Voices, which is, I think, a venue for incarcerated mothers to talk about their experience and bring that experience to other people. So there's really good work going on, and I think the more we have these discussions and the more we talk about ways to grow those discussions into movements, I think that's the way to do it. Definitely advocating around policy is really important, and there is some of that happening. You know, I think like you were saying, starting small and thinking about these specifics that we can do that both support mothers and don't, you know, build expensive new programs that expand the prison industrial complex. Like, thinking strategically about policy, that's really important. But also bringing people together and sharing stories, I think, is crucial. And actually, we're having a story sharing event, which I think a lot of people got flyers for. That's kind of the next step in this.
Sister, you need to be heard on the mic. No, seriously, because she can't, and anybody who watches this video, they need to hear your voice. Sister.
Right. So, and I'm just saying that
Holly.
So I think the important part is if you are going to join one of these projects, these are small, tiny projects with almost like no support and no money. So they're not going to be like the Salvation Army that has like a volunteer coordinator and people. And so I think that's what happens a lot in this area of work is people get discouraged because the hands can't be held, you know? And so you have to kind of know that going in, that you can come in and say, these are my skills. This is what I can do. I can take on a project and I can run with it. That's the kind of volunteer people can use. People often in our projects, I'm the only staff person. I get paid sometimes, you know? We have a great amount of volunteers that work with us, but they only work with us because they know how to work with us. You know what I mean? Like they can be independent contractors taking on these projects and just running with them. And so you have to be mindful of that and not get discouraged. If you go to something and you're like, oh, this is, you know, it's like, get in there and do something and then like let people help you do that thing really well. And lastly, I'd love to see a project here that's a prison doula project for women on the outside. I think we have to start thinking of outside the prison. We have to help people in the prison because real bodies are locked up there and real people are suffering behind bars. But like a lot of people are returning from prison in the hundreds of thousands every year, and they come back to communities that can't support them. And what we need on the outside is like a bunch of great folks like yourselves who can support women and mothers who are coming out of prison with childcare help to go and find that job. Because a lot of times you get out of prison, you have no support, your family usually, there's a lot of problems. So you come out, you can't get a job. Not just because of your record, but because you have no place to put your kids, you know, for a couple of hours to go out, and you end up being in Shanisha Taylor's position. And then you end up back in prison for violating your parole. So like, I think there's just so much going on in this city right now. We're in a really important, excellent time. And like, you know, the Illinois Clemency Project, and folks are looking for supporters of folks who can help them. But again, they can't hold your hand. So come in, like, you know, help people go out and do case review, go and look at the prisons, do this stuff, organize something yourself. Get 2 of your friends together and be like, we're the blah blah project, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what it's about, you know? Create your own container and then tell your friends to help you. I force everybody to help. There's some people in this room who know, I call them every day. I'm like, what? You design me a poster, you know? You artist, right? Bianca. Bianca put up a new post. She put up her website. I was embarrassed to see 100 posters that were mine. I was like, I'm going to stop asking you to do that.
In just 2 sentences, following up on that awesome speech, if people are interested in Chicago Women's Book Project, or if you're interested in a new group that's forming to do jail support at Cook County Jail called Breaking the Chains, let me know, because those are also projects that are kind of like 2 people. Oh yeah. Awesome.
So we have several more questions, and we've kept y'all way beyond our action time. So I think we're not gonna keep y'all any longer, unless y'all want us to, like as a unified voice. No, I'm just kidding. I have a child downstairs who's been running up here back and forth. I'm sure y'all have seen him. He's a cute little boy. I'm just kidding. Okay. Anyway, some of these questions are really, not some of them, all of them, are really wonderful questions that I wish we did have time to answer, but Holly has sent me a little side note saying that we can definitely answer them on Facebook and follow up with questions on Facebook and through our follow-up event. I did want to end with something. So we came here to discuss the rights of mothers to breastfeed, but our issues, as Maya spoke about earlier, don't end just there, right? If we're talking about women's right to breastfeed, we are talking about women's rights. Her right to live outside of a prison, her rights to determine her life within their confining walls. If we are talking about women's rights to breastfeed, we are talking about Illinois' private prisons. We're talking about its private foster care system. We're talking about the growing numbers of prisons. We're talking about the demolishing social services. We're talking about the closing of hundreds of schools in poor Black neighborhoods. We're talking about unemployment. We're talking about domestic violence. If we're talking about a woman's right to breastfeed, we're talking about women's rights. A woman's rights to determine her own life, to be self-determined, not only as an individual, but as a community. Whether as a mother we choose to breastfeed or not, that's not the question. It's the question of a woman's right to determine her own body and to have autonomy over her own body. And that's why we stand here today. And that's why you heard the voices of these beautiful, incredible women, and some in the audience who know something, speaking about these issues, right? And now I'm gonna go off the paper and just say that thank you all very much for inviting me to be a part of your group, your conversations, listening to my corny jokes as we see y'all didn't laugh at that one, that's cool. Yeah, and thank you for allowing me to be an awkward Black girl on this stage next to another awkward Black girl. I'm going there, Miriam. I'm going there. If we're talking about a woman's right to breastfeed, we're talking about Marissa Alexander in this wonderful table over here that was set up so lovely and beautifully. Yes, please support Marissa Alexander as a woman, as a person who's incarcerated, as a person who we know is a victim of mass incarceration.
Every dollar goes to her legal defense fund. Every single dollar to her legal defense fund.
And if you're not present and you're watching on TV, can you go to the store online?
Yes, thank you. You can go to the store online at tinyurl.com/Marissa, M-A-R-I-S-S-A, store. tinyurl.com/Marissa store. Thank you.
Your call. You want to do a man, holler at me, give me some money. You're supposed to. Ooh, you're supposed to.
Thank you, guys.
Nope. I'm very mad right now. And yes, you are. I have you down.
That's not me.
Clap for the kids, y'all. Go, poo-poo. Go with Baby's not bars. 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 Y'all can clap harder than that for these kids. Baby's not bars. 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 Baby's not bars.